Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to be talking about how avoidant partners would frequently be relieved if you initiated divorce, despite what more preoccupied partners may think. Before that, please do subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was about generalizing, and I've told you that at the beginning of every episode so far for a few days. So hopefully, you just suck it up and subscribe because you have a lot of good content there. Okay, so what do I mean by avoidant partners? Well, what do I mean by avoidant partners? You should know that already. Refer back to the Attachment Style podcast. And I have avoidant wives and avoidant husbands. So, I mean, everything about avoidant people is in my podcast already. But what do I mean by avoidant partners would be relieved if you initiated divorce? Well, I mean, let's look at what avoidance means. They do not like to connect, like they don't want to need somebody. They don't want to be dependent, and they don't really want to be close in the way that particularly their preoccupied partner wants them to be close, which they find to be stultifying, overwhelming, and stressful. So the reality is that while some avoidant partners would be and many may be upset that they're having marital conflict. Most people are upset to be having marital conflict unless you're a sociopath. The idea of leaving after years of marital conflict would not be as upsetting to avoidant people as it is to preoccupied people. This should not be a shock because their main trait is that they deny and really don't feel deeply. They don't feel that romantic relationships are that important, and they don't like to be constantly around somebody, particularly somebody who wants something from them emotionally or sexually. So this last part about sexually is why avoidant women may be particularly relieved if their husbands initiate divorce, because avoidant men still like having sex with the woman if that's what they're doing. And also avoidant men are less likely to be highly sensitive. And highly sensitive women, or I guess I shouldn't say that. Both genders can be highly sensitive, but women have more, from what I've seen, of the hatred of noise and the intolerance of noise and like kind of bustle and stress, coupled with a desire to put themselves in that situation, which maybe the men have the same aversion to noise, but they just don't put themselves in the situation. So, for example, a guy may have, a lot of sensory issues around noise and just be like, I am going, into the other room from the children. They're just going to be here bickering with each other and watching TV. Whereas the mother, and women do more frequently have anxiety and depression, will more likely castigate herself for the desire to leave the children in one room while she goes into the other one. So she's highly sensitive and she can't stand noise and she's forcing herself to stay in the situation. Well, that's not going to be good, right? So the reality is that when highly sensitive women also have avoidant attachment, they kind of hate being at home. With the children. They love the children, but the children are super stressful. So it's interesting because they frequently do a lot better when they're co-parenting than would be expected, or than they would have expected, because they get a break from the kids. So they get a break from the kids so they can kind of recharge, and then they're back in the game and they can parent solo without anybody telling them what to do and without having to give the partner attention or engage with him or anything that she didn't want to do to begin with. So the women that I see that really find divorce to be a hell of a lot better for their families, for their mental health, and for even the children, are the ones where they were constantly in marital conflict with a preoccupied attachment husband who was always kind of following them around, like wanting to connect to them, which was super stressful, and they have multiple small children. So the noise and the overwhelm was really, really hard for them, and they couldn't get away from it. So in these situations, the woman does not want to initiate divorce because then she'd be the bad guy, and she sometimes thinks that the man will make the divorce very hard, that he will go after her in some way or accuse her of cheating or try to take more money than he should or something. The avoidant women, by the way, are also the women who frequently want to move out of the marital home and into an apartment. So they don't want to keep the house. They didn't like the house. The avoidant, highly sensitive woman really just wants to be done with the whole thing and basically go back to something that's like a dorm in a way. Like an apartment where things are taken care of. You don't have to deal with things breaking. You move in, people take care of, whatever needs to be fixed. You don't have that much to shop for. Maybe the kids split a room. At the max, it's a 3-bedroom. At the minimum, it's a 1-bedroom. When you sleep on the couch. I've seen this happen a lot with people where the woman is the avoidant, highly sensitive partner, and she just wants to get out of Dodge. This whole family life thing really didn't work out, and she will frequently say, I don't want to get remarried, and I like doing things my way. My time with the kids is a lot less stressful. My time without the kids is way less stressful, and I don't have any more marital conflict, obviously, nor do I particularly feel like dating, and if I do, it's only very, very casually, very infrequently. So it begs the question, that if everything's going to go better, including the main one for me always ethically is no conflict in front of the children. If there's a situation where you're like, holy shit, this describes my wife to a T. And again, it's more avoidant women that act like this than men, because the avoidant men, a couple things. I'll talk about that first. So the avoidant men, they're much more facts-based, and they stick in the realm of facts versus feelings. So they're the ones who know exactly how much money they're going to lose in this divorce and how much time with the kids they're going to lose. The kids don't really bother them as much as they bother, a highly sensitive woman, who feels that, again, as I described, she has to be there with them constantly engaging even when she cannot. He feels like he wants to be with his kids. He wants to have sex with the woman frequently, whether or not that's still happening. Sometimes he's holding out hope. Avoidant people do have hope in that domain, and in all domains. They're not feelingless. They're just less likely to show vulnerable feelings. And he also doesn't want to be crushed financially, which is kind of where his mind goes, practically speaking. He's the one who's going to be talking about 2 households and like the radius and where I'm going to drive and blah, blah, blah. And so he doesn't want to rock the boat. But the avoidant attachment woman similarly doesn't want to rock the boat, but also she is the one who's going to do a lot better in case of a separation. So what should you do? Oh, and that's not to say the avoidant man isn't going to do well. He will, and he'll probably date, not remarry, maybe not remarry, some remarry anyway, but date for longer, and then men remarry more than women do, by the way. I think I've told you that statistic before. But anyway, he will date. He will do a lot of his hobbies. He will realize that women find him attractive. All these various things I talked about in the podcast or the video about how men fare after divorce. But anyway, he won't feel the relief generally that the woman feels. Because to the woman, she's getting away from somebody hounding her and the noise and the chaos of the family unit, which she feels so guilty saying she wants to get away from, but she really does. So then it begs the question, why would you want to stay in a relationship where somebody would be relieved if you initiated divorce? Well, because you are keeping on holding out hope that it's going to change and that somehow you're going to stop fighting all the time and you're going to reconnect and this person's going to love you in the way that you want to be loved and all of this. And sometimes that can happen and couples counseling can help, but it is really something to be thinking about. If you have been deeply unhappy for years or even decades, there's conflict in front of the children, or in a best case scenario, they're seeing a bickering, loveless marriage, and your avoidant partner wants pretty much nothing to do with you, it really makes you think that maybe y'all just should have like a very open discussion about the pros and cons of staying together. Avoidant people love discussions that are not emotional, so you want to make it a very fact-based pros and cons discussion. Literally, if you say something like, if we were to separate, I would want 50% custody and I would give you 50%, or you would take, or however it would be divided, 50% of the assets and whatever the child support formula was. Many avoidant people will waive child support and alimony in the states that have alimony because these women do not want any. And men now, there's more and more men who need to have alimony because women out-earn them. But avoidant people do not want to take any of your stuff, in the same way. They don't want to have, they'll take, the money, certainly in the beginning, but they don't want to have some ongoing arrangement. Frequently, they just want to start out on their own again. Because remember, their entire personality, their entire attachment style is predicated on independence. So that's why most women that I interact with that have avoidant attachment, they do not want any alimony. They are saying, okay, we make close to enough money. We don't need child support, whatever. We'll just split all the obligations and it's done. Many of them are staying because they are terrified that the preoccupied attachment man will make a divorce into hell on earth and will alienate her from her kids or will take all of her money or something. And if you have a sit-down discussion and you say, in the case of a divorce, I am not going to do anything bad to you. That would only hurt our children. I'm not going to blame you publicly. I am not going to humiliate you in any way. And I don't want it to happen. But if it does happen, I am going to be, gracious about it, and hopefully we can amicably co-parent. These are the kind of conversations that can really take a lot of the anxiety away from the avoidant person, such that they may be able to say, yes, that sounds good. And if somebody's going to say, yes, that sounds good, shit, why are you staying in that marriage, you might as well go find somebody that loves you, particularly, again, if the children have been picking up on extended conflict and difficulty, and if there were no children, then you would have been out of the relationship anyway. But as long as you can ethically say that you have tried your hardest, you have gone to couples counseling, you have tried another couples counselor. People usually come to me after they've seen multiple couples counselors, So if you've tried your best and something on the outskirts of your consciousness and or listening to this podcast makes you realize that the only reason that your spouse may be staying with you is because they're terrified that you would make it a contentious divorce. Well, is that a way to live? You probably, you should never make a contentious divorce for the sake of your children. Children have lasting trauma about this. I see them 30 years later in therapy telling me how horrible their parents' divorce was. So don't be that person that leads to your kids doing that. If you can do things amicably and it would be a relief to your partner, and the icing on the cake is they're going to be a better person and parent because they get some breaks. Literally, people don't realize what actually happens until they're living it, which is that you don't have your kids every other weekend. So you can cobble together ways to see your kids. If you have an amicable divorce, kids do more activities than, anybody. So you could see them at every damn thing that they do over the weekend. If you got multiple kids, you could offer to drive them here or there. You could pretty much see them all every day if you really wanted to, and you had a very amicable divorce where you lived close. Some people can do that, but some people that are more avoidant hole up on the weekends without the kids and recharge and do some hobbies and and I'm not saying, by the way, of course, that everybody can see their kids every day. I'm not stupid. But I'm saying there's a very wide spectrum of involvement, even with 50-50 custody. But the more avoidant people tend to intelligently use that time, the avoidant, highly sensitive people, rather, use that time to recharge so that they are on their A game when they see their kids again. And then they can parent in the way they want, and they can have all their ducks in a row, and they can do things at the time that they want, and in the ways that they want, and have the coping strategies that they want. And also they just had a break, so they're really able to deal with the noise and the chaos a lot better. So it's interesting because I work with lots of divorced people and they all have these different arrangements. Some people are always going and seeing the co-parent at the soccer games and they're trying to get as much time as they can with seeing the kids. But there are some people that are, whether it's consciously or not, really making the most of their recharge time. And these people usually end up much better parents than they were in the marriage, because in the marriage, not only was there marital conflict, but they could never get away. They could just never get away from the whole family structure, including a partner who always wanted more attention from them. So there's a partner who wanted more attention, the kids who wanted more attention. They couldn't parent in the way that they wanted to parent because of the other partner being some sort of bottleneck, wanting to do things their way too. So sometimes it can be a much different situation. So if you are in a situation where you have constant conflict, you've tried couples counseling, you've tried all these things, nothing works, you may want to have a sit-down discussion and say, is any of you just staying in this because you think that I will make a divorce difficult? If so, I won't. And some people have those conversations in couples counseling, and it could be really life-changing, obviously very pragmatically life-changing, in as much as it frees the partner to move forward. And in those situations, again, it's usually for the best that two people that are very, very, incompatible and in constant conflict and wanting things from the other that the other can never give, and have tried numerous ways of repairing and coming together and compromising with no effect, then that is a situation where it's often a best case scenario for the reasons I described, as well as generally for the fulfillment of both people and for the children not to be around a difficult relationship, which is very, very upsetting for children. All right, well, I hope that this gave you something to think about, not an uplifting topic, but a topic that is important nonetheless. And I will talk to y'all soon. Please do subscribe.